Hello everyone. I have started my channel in which I'll be posting various videos discussing the difficult anatomy topics. Now, as the students find it very difficult to understand and write about the ganglia in the exam, so I decided to start my channel with the various peripheral parasympathetic ganglia. I'll try to explain these topics in a very simple manner. I hope you understand and like these videos. Now, in today's video, we'll be discussing the topic of ciliary ganglion. As we know, there are four peripheral parasympathetic ganglia: the ciliary, otic, sphenopalatine or pterygopalatine, and the submandibular ganglia. Now, coming to the basic question, what is ganglia? Before studying the ganglia in details, we should know what is ganglia. As we know, there are neurons, nerve cells in the central nervous system, that is brain and spinal cord. Maximum neurons are concentrated in the central nervous system, but we have few collections of neurons outside the brain and spinal cord, and they form the ganglia. So basically, what is ganglia? It is collection of neurons outside the central nervous system. Now in this, we can again divide them into two: sympathetic ganglia, parasympathetic ganglia. Sympathetic ganglia are those which are present besides the spinal cord. So they are just present close to the spinal cord, forming a sympathetic chain. And parasympathetic ganglia are present close to the peripheral organs which they supply, and that is the reason why these ganglia are known as peripheral parasympathetic ganglia. They are present close to the organs which they supply. Now, whenever we discuss any ganglia, we always explain it under three headings. We have the location, where is it located? Various routes, that means which nerve fibers enter into it, and then what are the branches of the ganglia, that means the nerve fibers which start from the ganglia and go to the peripheral organs which they supply, and then the important relevant applied aspect of the ganglia. Starting with the location. Now the ciliary ganglion is present at the apex of the bony orbit between two structures, optic nerve and the lateral rectus muscle. Now we can easily draw this diagram and show all the structures. You yourself can draw it right now with me. This is the bony orbit. As we know that the orbital cavities are the pyramidal cavities. It will be a very basic diagram, very easy for you people to understand. So this is the pyramidal bony cavity. This is the orbital septum. As I am explaining to you, you can draw it with me, and you can also label these structures. All the structures which we are drawing. So this is the orbital septum. The orbital septum. Then we have the eyeball. All of you in your school time would have drawn the basic outline of the eyeball. You just have to draw that outline, and with a lens in the eyeball. And then at the back of the eyeball, there is the optic nerve. You can label this structure as optic nerve. And here we have a muscle, that is the lateral rectus muscle, which will be inserting in front of the equator. This is the equator of the eyeball. So this muscle is going to insert in front of the equator at the junction of the sclera and the cornea. At the junction of the sclera and the cornea. So label this as lateral rectus muscle. If you want, you can draw this muscle with a brown color, but what I prefer is that when we are showing ganglia, we can draw the entire diagram with the black color, and we can show the different routes with different colors. So as I already said, the ciliary ganglion is present at the back of the bony orbit, apex of the bony orbit, in between the optic nerve and the lateral rectus muscle. Label the structure as ciliary ganglion. Now I assume the location of the ciliary ganglion is very clear by this diagram. Coming to the roots and the branches, of which we'll first discuss the branches to make it again simpler. Now it is very easy to learn. We don't have many branches which we have to learn. Ciliary ganglion they give 16 to 20 branches. So basically there are 8 to 10 which further divide into 16 to 20 branches, and these are known as short ciliary nerves. Short ciliary nerves. So you can draw them. These are the branches. They are further dividing. So basically 8 to 10 further divide to form 16 to 20 short ciliary nerves. So we have covered the location, we have covered the branches. Now coming to the roots. In the roots, we have the parasympathetic root, the sympathetic root and the sensory root. Now, to remember them, first of all, it is important to understand what all the structures are they supplying. Coming to the parasympathetic root, first of all, parasympathetic root supplies only two muscles. So you need to learn those two muscles. The basic function is to constrict the pupil. Now for constriction of the pupil, you have one muscle, that is the sphincter pupillae, and another muscle, that is the ciliaris. What is the function of ciliaris? Again, it is accommodation for the near vision. That means if you are looking at a distant object and then you immediately need to shift your vision to a closer object, the pupil will constrict, and that is the function of ciliaris. So it is going to supply two muscles. One is sphincter pupillae, another is ciliaris. Now coming to the sympathetic. Whenever you are excited, nervous, anxious, there is sympathetic overactivity and the pupil gets dilated. So this makes it very clear that the sympathetic root will supply dilator pupillae. So they are exactly opposite. Parasympathetic will supply the sphincter pupillae, sympathetic will supply the dilator pupillae, and always remember sympathetic root will go along the vessels and it will also supply the vessels of the orbit. So now we can start drawing these roots, starting with the parasympathetic root. Parasympathetic root, okay, so there is, all of you know, in the midbrain, there is a nucleus that is called oculomotor nucleus. Oculomotor nucleus. From the oculomotor nucleus, a cranial nerve arises, that is oculomotor nerve, or the third cranial nerve. So this is the oculomotor nerve. Now oculomotor nerve will divide into two. One is the superior division. It is easy to draw, and try to label all the structures as you draw them. Inferior division. This inferior division, we will not talk about the superior division here. This inferior division gives branches to medial rectus, to inferior rectus, and then to the lateral rectus. Then to the inferior oblique. I'm so sorry. So this inferior division gives branches to medial rectus, inferior rectus, and this branch goes to inferior oblique muscle. Right? It will go to the inferior oblique. Now we need to draw the parasympathetic root. For this we can use any color. So parasympathetic root starts from a nucleus that is closely associated with the oculomotor nucleus. that is called Edinger-Westphal nucleus. Edinger-Westphal nucleus. Now the fibers will start from the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. They will join the oculomotor nerve and they will not follow the superior division. They will go along the inferior division and then along the branch to inferior oblique. Leave this branch, relay in this ganglia. So this is how you show the synapse. Relay in the ciliary ganglion, and then further the fibers which will arise, they will supply through the short ciliary nerves to two structures. We already did sphincter pupillae and ciliaris. Okay, I'll again repeat it. How do you describe it? We will start. This is the ganglion in which relay is occurring. So we have the preganglionic before the ganglion, and we have the postganglionic which are arising from after the relay. So the preganglionic fibers will arise from Edinger-Westphal nucleus in the midbrain. They will go along with the oculomotor nerve. Then they will go along with the inferior division of oculomotor nerve. Then follow the branch to the inferior oblique muscle. Leave it, enter the ganglion, relay in the ganglion. Then after the relay, postganglionic fibers will arise and via the short ciliary nerves supply two muscles, that is ciliaris and sphincter pupillae. That is all you have to learn about the parasympathetic route. Now the next route, that is the sympathetic route. So for the parasympathetic, you should know from where the preganglionic fibers are arising, along which nerve they are going through. Another very important point, relay is occurring in the ciliary ganglion. So as you can notice, the preganglionic component is very long, the postganglionic component is very short. Now coming to the sympathetic route. For the sympathetic route, I can use another color. So we can leave some space here. We have the spinal cord. We can draw a transverse section of spinal cord with the central canal. Now all of you are aware of this transverse section. There is a dorsal grey horn, there is a ventral grey horn. Now in few segments of the spinal cord, there is a lateral grey horn also. So we'll have to slightly modify this diagram and draw the lateral grey horn. Right? Then we have dorsal root ganglia, the ventral root. Both of these roots will join to form the spinal nerve, which is a mixed nerve. And then again they will divide to form the dorsal and the ventral rami. So this is the basic structure of the transverse section of spinal cord, which you should be thorough with. We have the transverse section. This is the dorsal grey horn, ventral grey horn, lateral grey horn, central canal, the dorsal root ganglia, ventral root. They join to form the spinal nerve, and then the spinal nerve divides into two, the dorsal rami and the ventral rami. Right? Now what about the sympathetic component? And then as I told you earlier that along with the spinal cord there is present the sympathetic chain. So in relation to the ciliary ganglion, we will have superior cervical ganglion. In the sympathetic chain we have many ganglia, cervical, thoracic, lumbar. So in relation to this topic, we will have the superior cervical ganglion. Now, how will you draw the sympathetic root? Sympathetic root will start from the lateral grey column, and then these fibers will follow the ventral root and then along the spinal nerve. Then they will follow the ventral rami and then leave the ventral rami and enter into the superior cervical ganglion, where the fibers will relay and then they will continue further. So, the preganglionic fibers are starting from the lateral gray column. They will follow the ventral root, the spinal nerve, the ventral ramus, enter the superior cervical ganglion, where now they will relay. And the postganglionic fibers, I already told you, sympathetic is always following the blood vessels. So they have to form a plexus around any blood vessel nearby. So we have the internal carotid artery. They will form a plexus around the internal carotid artery, and then the branch from this will again pass through ciliary ganglion. But the most important point is they will go without relay, and then via these short ciliary nerves will supply the dilator pupillae muscle and the vessels of the orbit. So the difference is the preganglionic is arising from a parasympathetic nucleus. Preganglionic component is very long. The relay is occurring in the ciliary ganglion. Postganglionic component is very short, supplying the sphincter pupillae and ciliaris. Whereas in case of sympathetic, preganglionic component is very small, arising from the lateral gray column of spinal segment C8 to T1. Relay is occurring in the superior cervical ganglion of the sympathetic chain. So the preganglionic becomes very short. The postganglionic is very long and it follows the vessel. So it will form a plexus along the internal carotid artery and will pass through the ciliary ganglion without relay, because the relay has already occurred here. So only the parasympathetic one is relaying. Others will not relay. And then finally, as I discussed, the sympathetic is going to supply the dilator pupillae and the vessels of the orbit. So through these branches, now we are left only with the sensory root. Now as we know, the head and neck, the sensory supply of the head and neck is by the trigeminal nerve. So we'll start with the trigeminal nerve. There is the fifth nerve. Fifth cranial nerve will give three branches. One is ophthalmic, maxillary, and mandibular. The ophthalmic will further divide into three divisions: frontal, lacrimal, and then we have the nasociliary, which we will draw with the blue color showing the sensory root. Nasociliary nerve. Now nasociliary nerve approaches the orbit and gives many branches to the eyeball. These branches are called long ciliary nerves. Along with this, the sensory root fibers, they also pass, a branch from nasociliary also passes through the ganglion without relay and is distributed via the short ciliary nerves to the various structures of the orbit. So we can say in easy words that the sensory root is carried by the nasociliary nerve. Nasociliary nerve, a branch of it passes through the ganglion without relay, and few branches from the nasociliary, they directly supply the vessels in the structures in the orbit. They are known as the long ciliary nerves. So again, this component is not relaying, only the parasympathetic has relayed. And other important thing is, the long ciliary nerves are the branches of the nasociliary nerve, whereas the short ciliary nerve are the branches of the ciliary ganglion. So how do we trace the sensations? Sensations will be traced in the reverse direction. Structures from the orbit, the sensations will pass from these structures through the short ciliary nerves, via the nasociliary nerve, then the ophthalmic division of the trigeminal nerve, then the fifth nerve nucleus, and then to the higher structures like thalamus, and finally to the cerebral cortex, the sensory area of the cerebral cortex. So this is how the sensations from the orbit are carried to the sensory cortex. So this is all about the ciliary ganglion. If you are able to understand this topic, I'll be very happy, and please like my video and subscribe it so that I can post more videos. And in the next video, which I'll be linking to this video, I'll be sharing with you some important things, like what are the various important questions related to the ciliary ganglion, what are the various important MCQs related to it, and how do we answer any problem-based question related to it, so that it is easy for you to write the relevant answer of that question. Thank you so much.